After I posted 2 Waldorf videos, I've been receiving emails at philosophofreedom.com from teachers and parents who are speaking out against the attempt to abolish Waldorf schools. I am withholding their identities to protect them from retaliation. Waldorf Teacher 1 says, "Thanks for having these conversations, Tom. I feel a sense of bravery knowing that I am not alone in this fight. I am doing a teacher training program right now and deliberately spoke out that I will not be doing the diversity class put on by an organization supported by AWSNA. I have been speaking out against the diversity, equity, and inclusion work at the school that I teach at, and am working to try and change the ways things work." The protests, riots, and looting of the social justice movement has terrified all of our cultural institutions that are being accused of being systemically racist. If you believe the whole system is fundamentally racist, the only solution is to tear it down. The call for radical change includes our institutions of education. The extremists are not only calling for the abolition of the police, they are also calling for the abolition of schools. At a recent video conference, leaders of the Abolish School movement were asked, "Are we talking about abolishing school?" The panel responded, "Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about."
Well, I think that brings us to the question of abolition. And people, this word is out there in a new way, and more people are thinking, it seems like, and talking about it, but mostly in respect to the police or to prisons or to the carceral state. Abolition of police or abolition of prisons. But what does it mean for school? Are we talking about abolishing school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
See, this is why I wanted this conversation.
It turns out school abolitionist Dina Simmons is a resource highly recommended by AWSNA. Why in the world would AWSNA want to abolish Waldorf schools? AWSNA is the Waldorf Accreditation Agency. The only reason AWSNA was created was to be the guardians of Waldorf education, to ensure Waldorf schools remain in agreement with the practices and principles of Waldorf and apply the insights of Rudolf Steiner. Teacher 2 says, "I have recently been extremely alarmed by the social activist rhetoric suddenly appearing in my Waldorf school, and alarmingly in documents issued by AWSNA." Teacher 3, "Social justice ideas are penetrating into the Waldorf school movement. Teachers need to be educated on the Marxist foundation on which these ideas are based. This is being led in part by the leadership of AWSNA." Teacher 4, "This is what's happening in our Waldorf school. I'm the only one standing up, and it is crazy-making. No one on the DEI committee even understands Waldorf. AWSNA is completely off the wall. I've tried to say at our meetings that we must be independent thinkers and not follow an umbrella organization that says things that don't apply. It's like talking to a wall. They don't care. They are not making decisions based in anthroposophy. They're working out of warped political correctness and ruining our children's school." Beverly Amico, marketing director of AWSNA, began the process of abolishing Waldorf schools in her article, "Working Toward Anti-Racist Education." Featured in Amico's article are Dina Simmons' ideas for why schools should be abolished. Simmons says the problem is that education is dominated by European values and history, white privilege and supremacy, and of course, systemic racism. The anti-racist movement is not about ending racism. It is part of a political revolution. It is part of the broader culture war that wants to abolish the liberal European Enlightenment values of reason, individuality, freedom of expression, and universal human rights, and replace them with human emotions, collectivism, political correctness, and reverse racism. This is why social justice activists want to abolish America and are tearing down monuments to the founders, Washington and Jefferson. To abolish Waldorf, it is necessary to tear down the founder, Rudolf Steiner. A Rudolf Steiner monument was severely damaged when the bronze bust and plaque were torn off and it was sprayed with red paint. AWSNA has made no apparent attempt to defend Steiner or Waldorf. They have joined the social justice mob by denouncing Steiner and by making a commitment to break down Waldorf education. Rudolf Steiner knew that the term justice is not really understood today. Peace is only possible when each individual's freedom is assured. This is why the teaching methods of Waldorf are intended to free the child, not indoctrinate them into a political ideology. Teacher 5. Not a single teacher in my school understands the philosophy of freedom. Instead, social justice is what they understand because it resonates with their progressive liberal political views. Teacher 6. An organization that places a person's prominent identity on race has abandoned Steiner's philosophy of freedom. The only road to real change is that of developing the self and taking responsibility for your own life circumstances. Dina Simmons' worldview was shaped by growing up in what she describes as the violence of injustice and inequity in the inner city of Bronx, New York. She also taught in a Bronx middle school. What she learned was that some inner city schools are broken and may need to be abolished.
When we go to Black and brown schools, we usually have an intervention. Say it's like, whatever it is, like it could be SEL. We cannot teach this intervention so that now our students know how to manage and deal with and navigate racism, right? So it's still steeped in white supremacy. And that's why we need to abolish it, man, get rid of it.
What does Simmons' experience of broken inner city schools have to do with Waldorf schools? Many Waldorf parents agree that public schools are broken. That is why they place their children in a Waldorf school. I doubt if Simmons has ever been in a Waldorf school. There is no reason for AWSNA to apply Simmons' criticism of public schools to Waldorf schools. An Anthroposophist explains, so-called social justice appears naturally in our souls when we develop ourselves properly. A concept like internal racism underscoring any Waldorf education is repugnant and an insult to Steiner's teachings. Teacher 7. I do not agree that Waldorf education needs to have racism rooted out of it, as it is the most culturally respectful education I have ever come across. The Waldorf community has fallen under a shroud of silence for fear of being called a racist. Teacher 8. I appreciate the work you are doing to raise awareness and crack open the culture of silent dissent that is happening in Waldorf schools. Critical race theory, which is the basis of anti-racist education, acts like anyone who disagrees with it must do so only for racist and white supremacist reasons. After Simmons abolishes schools, what is she going to replace them with?
We have to ask families what worked and what didn't work. And we have to think about where the partnerships that came up all of a sudden between businesses, between families, between schools, where were they? And how can we lean into that a little bit more as we abolish the old and go forward with the new? We have to ask families what worked and what didn't work.
So after Waldorf education is abolished, then we should ask families what worked and what didn't work? Is that AWSNA's plan? I have a better idea. Let's not abolish Waldorf education. Since it works, let's try to expand it and make it available to more families. Isn't this what Beverly Amico was hired to do? Has she contacted Dina Simmons to tell her that Waldorf works and may be the solution to a broken education system? After all, it was AWSNA that created the Waldorf Works marketing campaign. AWSNA's website used to look like this. Its address used to be wywaldorfworks.org. AWSNA's Twitter handle is @wywaldorfworks. You can even buy a bumper sticker that says Waldorf Works. This is not just a clever marketing campaign. It is backed up by research. A survey spanning some 60 years of over 500 Waldorf graduates found 3 key findings. Waldorf graduates are independent thinkers. They think for themselves and translate their new ideas into practice. Waldorf graduates value lasting relationships and seek out opportunities to be of help to others. Waldorf graduates are guided by an inner moral compass. They carry high ethical principles into their chosen professions. I sent my children to Waldorf schools and would agree with these findings. I would have to ask AWSNA, when did Waldorf stop working? When you decided political indoctrination was more important than freedom? There are still hundreds of Why Waldorf Works links throughout the web. But AWSNA recently disabled that link and then redirected it to a new website. The new AWSNA website emphasizes school renewal and the education of the future. What is AWSNA's education of the future? To find out, all you have to do is investigate AWSNA's new list of recommended resources. None of the resources have any knowledge of Waldorf teaching methods. But they don't need to if Waldorf is to be abolished. Parent 1 investigated the resource material and said, the linked material is angry, overtly skin color centric, anti-white, anti-white woman, anti-male, anti-police, pro-Marxist, anti-capitalist, pro-revolution, pro-destruction of the political economic system of capitalism, etc., etc. Rather than opening windows to the wonder and beauty of the world, anti-racist education is intended to fill your child with resentment, shame, and guilt by telling them that whiteness is bad.
Whiteness is a bad deal. It always was. All right, here's a contract binding you to whiteness. You get stolen land, stolen riches, special favors, and then there's a little footnote that says land, riches, and favors may be revoked at any time for any reason. Whiteness gets to mess endlessly with the lives of your friends, neighbors, loved ones, and all fellow humans of color for the purpose of profit. The only price is your soul. Sign below.
Social justice educators like to rewrite history so they can judge the past by today's standards. Reviewers call Zinn's A People's History of the United States a depressing read full of the dark bits of our history. It teaches why America is hated around the world. Students are becoming depressed. Waldorf Teacher 9 said, Zinn's book is read in the 8th grade. I see the book on the students' desks, and upon asking a few about it, they said that it depresses them. Based on AWSNA's recommended resource list, it looks to me like the future of Waldorf education is going to be inspired by a veiled form of Marxist ideology that views the world through the lens of oppressor and oppressed. This is driving families away. Parent 2, the school is diverging from the core Steiner teachings and becoming a vehicle for postmodernist Marxist indoctrination. After considering Waldorf, I enrolled my children in a different school. Teacher 10, I have been very concerned with the social justice and socialist agenda infiltrating the Waldorf movement and the process of indoctrination that we are starting to see in the new curriculum that is being created by the Diversity Committee. I have been very worried that we will lose the philosophy foundation as we stop basing our insights on anthroposophy. This is not what Waldorf parents signed up for. Parent 3 says, what I see is pure smash-and-grab political activism that has already, at least in our case, infected and taken over the philosophical underpinnings of the school. It's Waldorf in name only. We have already removed our youngest child from school because our local Waldorf school is pushing this material aggressively. Good teachers are being forced out. Parent 4. There are still good teachers in Waldorf schools, but more and more, it seems, the good ones are forced out or forced to go along. This is cause for great concern. Dreams of a Waldorf education are being dashed. Parent 5. Although my husband and I went through great lengths to pinch pennies and gather the funds, we will not be placing our daughter in the local Waldorf school here. Which brings me to the question, is there still a good Waldorf school out there? Any advice? Or know of a Waldorf school that is still teaching the traditional Rudolf Steiner values? Waldorf teachers and families who are leaving AWSNA schools will form new schools. This will split the Waldorf school movement in two. And some established Waldorf schools will declare their independence from AWSNA. From what I understand, the only power that AWSNA really holds is ownership of named service marks, but there are guidelines to deal with that. Now is the time to stand up for Rudolf Steiner and true Waldorf education before it is too late and lost forever. Share this video, talk to your teacher and school, form coalitions, start a new school.